slideshow? And can you still see me, or am I gone?
You're gone.
Okay.
I can see you.
You can still see me? Okay. Well, I guess it depends. So,
yeah.
I appreciate everyone coming tonight, and I have a PowerPoint slide that I've put together. My name is Kate Sherrill, and I am a school counseling intern at Boltz Middle School. And we are going to talk tonight about ways that you can connect with the Boltz Counseling Office, the services that are offered through the Wellness Center and Boltz School Counseling Program. And then we all are also going to touch on how we can support our students during remote instructions. And then at the end, there'll be time for discussion and questions. So the Boltz Counseling Office includes me, who's the intern, and I work with Miss Christy Chappell and Miss Deb Morrison, who have joined us tonight in the event that you have questions that I cannot assist with, and to provide additional support on these areas of topics. Each of us has a bookings page where you can schedule an appointment to meet with us directly through the website. I have put the links in the chat for how you can access those. Both Ms. Chappell and Ms. Morrison's bookings page can be directly accessed through the Boltz Counseling page, which there's a link, like I said, on the chats. So things that we would hope that you would consider reaching out to the school counseling, to the school counselors about are if there are class schedule changes that you would like to inquire about. They are the point of contact for your students about how to set up class schedules and when you register for classes. Also, there's support about personal well-being. If your student is finding themselves needing coping strategies for stress, anxiety, if they have friends concerns, that is a good time for them to connect with their school counselor. If they're experiencing bullying, if they are having difficulties at home with relationships or friends relationships, the counselors at Boltz and myself are there to help talk to your students and support them as they determine their next steps and feel a way to find connection. Other things that we would help them with are academic concerns. If students are having trouble studying, if they would like to talk about test taking strategies, especially in the remote environment, we'll talk a little bit about time management. And then also, if there is a need for your family to access some community resources, both Ms. Morrison and Ms. Chappell are great resources for you to find out about those resources within our community. And if there's a question that you're not sure if you should ask, I think you should ask it anyway. I think that you should just send an email and say, I don't know who to ask, but this is a question I have. And if one of us doesn't know the answer, then we can sure work to help you figure out what that answer might be. So with the move to online learning and the switch of back and forth from hybrid to online, we have noticed that there is a need for students to find structure and a rhythm both in the home and at school. So I think that that is one thing that schools do really well, is they provide structure. They provide an opportunity for your students to know what's coming every day, what to expect from the day, and the consistency of what that day looks like. And so in middle school, there is a shift going from them being externally motivated to internally motivated. And what I mean by internal motivation is a desire to do things based off of some internal drive or internal reasoning, something that's going on inside the self. And so the external, you can, please. Sorry.
Totally understand. No worry.
I have a partner. He's supposed to be there. I'm not sure. So I really am sorry. So anyway, to go back to external versus internal motivation. So really in middle school, we are trying to help students find ways that they can gain access to internal control and to internal motivation. But right now, they are still looking externally to assess where their success and failures are. So as they are transitioning in this area, the move to a remote learning environment is just adding another layer for them to navigate. So things that are helpful to consider is to make sure that your students, when they're at home, to have for a similar schedule each school day. So Monday through Friday should look similar in an ideal world. And that structure, which is normally created at school, will have to be created by them and by their grown-ups in the house. So those grown-ups in the house can help them create that structure, and then the student will have to kind of follow that rhythm in order for it to become more of a routine. So things to think about are the setup of a workspace. It can be taken down nightly, but in an ideal world, a student would be in a similar workspace each day to do their work. The workspace would allow them to have access to their computer and some writing areas for them to have a notebook next to them. And then in an ideal world, it would also be somewhat centrally located so that they are not feeling completely isolated. It needs to be quiet, so it's like a balancing act where it needs to be quiet, but they also need to feel like they have some connections, maybe to a sibling or someone else within the living situation. We also want to look at how we build in physical activity, how we build in free choice for their time, how we build in their chore time, and then how we build in screen-free work. So primarily during the morning, they're online in their classes, and then they have their afternoon to do work. And how that afternoon is structured can be developed based off of the needs of the family unit. I also think that in an ideal setting, there would be a time that's created every day that there's a check-in with a grown-up in the home. So follow-ups are done from the day before. They can give you an idea of what's happened with their day, and then encouraging them to use their Boltz planner, because that Boltz planner will help them navigate what they still have remaining, hopefully what they still have on their horizon, and will be a good place for you to check to see if things are being checked off or if they're still needing attention. Other things that you want to be mindful of when you are creating your family rhythm is think about what has been working well for you already. So if you have needs that are yours, your work needs, your other commitment needs, you want to also work around those priorities. So think about how things are going now, what's working well, and then what's not working so well, and be willing to adapt as things change. And, you know, so I'll create an example here in the next slide, but think about what you have repeating commitments for, and then build around those repeated commitments. And then I also think a lot of times there, at least in my, I mean, as we can tell with my children coming in the middle of a presentation, like there are times that you just have to let it go, right? Like I had scheduled this time to be with you all tonight, and that may not have gone exactly as I had planned, and I am just going to have to let it go. So here is an example of a schedule that I put together. based off of the current Boltz schedule in the virtual world, where they are in periods 1, 2, 3, and 4 from basically 8 o'clock in the morning until around 12:30. And so I do think the beginning of the day is a good way to start a consistent routine. You know, waking up at a similar time, brushing their teeth, getting dressed, making their bed, any sort of morning chore that they have, and then allowing them some time to have free time. So time where they read or they run around outside or whatever they choose, you know, 10, 15 minutes of them to exert energy before they then get in front of a screen for the morning. Then they go through their screen time with their instructors, teaching in the virtual setting. And on Fridays, that's asynchronous, but I think in an ideal world, that Friday time is used for those classes as well. So if they can work on Fridays when they're typically in class doing the work for those classes, they have set themselves up to stay on task every week and hopefully can end their Fridays feeling like they're in a good place, they've got their work done, and are ready to start the weekend feeling good about themselves, because who doesn't like to feel good about themselves? So I think one thing to do is to ask your student for input when you create this schedule. I think another thing that you do is you can look at your schedule and your commitments and build around that. So, you know, mirroring, this is what your schedule looks like, this is what my schedule looks like, and then setting time where they know when they can come to you for ask for help, or when you're going to do the check-in. You can see in the example I provide like a check-in time from 6:30 to 6:45. And so I think that consistency of knowing when they can get support from you and when you're not available, like that's an important boundary as well. Like, I obviously have struggled with that myself with the door, but you know, that is a boundary that I need to create in order to meet my needs for my work and my school. And so you have those exact same needs. And I think role modeling that is a good thing for your students to see. If you role model that when it's time to work, we work, and when it's time to connect, we connect, then that routine and regulation will become more automated for them and more familiar with them. Another resource that I think can be really helpful that I've been working with a few students on is creating an active sheet where they lay out their schedule and the links that have like the email address for their teachers, where they go to get their homework, things to know about how things are posted or what's typically done in that class. And then this can also serve as a resource for you when it's time to check in. If you do not have access to your students' classrooms, you can request access directly from their teachers so that you can look at those. But I also think in that nightly check-in time, this document can be a place where the student drives. So they show you, show me your social studies page. And so they get on and they show you your social studies page, and you can have that conversation about, you said that you were done, but I see 2 assignments still missing. Can you tell me more about what you need to do in order to get those done? And so creating some accountability and counterbalance, but in an ideal world, they're driving that navigation of the computer so that they know that it's coming when they check in with you, so that they hopefully through the routine start to check those things off before they come and connect with their grown-up. And then talking about setting expectations, I think that the expectations that we set at the start of every day and at the start of every week can allow the students to know what their goals are and what their needs are, and what your goals are and what your needs are. So in an ideal world, students are online with their videos on and engaging during the synchronous time. For teachers, if they have an opportunity to see your students' face through a video, it is so much more impactful, and they can read better if the students are able to understand the material, if the classroom setting is going well. It's very challenging for teachers to teach to a class full of black screens. That is very hard for them to keep a pulse on what students are doing well and what students are not doing well. I think it's important to ask your students if they know who and how to ask for help in a class. So I'm going to pick on math because that is what I'm going to do. So if your student is logged into math and you noted they're missing 4 assignments, something that you can ask them is, who can you ask for help with those 4 assignments that are missing? How do you ask them for help? And then maybe the first few times, watch them ask for help, or set a time where they are going to ask for help the next day, so that they kind of have that mapped out, that this is what I'm going to do in order to get help. I think that it's important for students to realize what their next steps are after each class. So I had mentioned having a notebook next to your computer. So in an ideal world, a student after each class writes down what their next step is for that class. And that note taking for their next steps will help guide them in their afternoon. Making sure that students know how to check their grades, and they can show grown-ups how to check their grades. We talked about in the last slide, but I think that that's an important step. And then if there are other commitments that need to be scheduled, I would encourage family units to think about how they're going to do that outside of synchronous time. With students having such a limited amount of time with their teachers each day, I think that that time becomes even more critical for them to engage with their teachers and their peers within the classroom. And then the big one is plan ahead. So request for help early in the day from teachers. So you connect with your student on Thursday and you figure things out that need to be done for Friday. If they ping their teachers or chat their teachers first thing Friday morning, they are more likely to get responses on Friday than if they reach out to them at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday. So how they time their responses, and or when they send the request for help. Do you send the request for help after the homework is due, or do you send the request before the homework is due? And that's a question you can ask your student, and then see where they think the expectation is. I do think that as you set expectations, there's an opportunity for a conversation to be asked about what they think the expectation should be, and if they think it's a realistic expectation. And then I think another thing, when you're setting expectations, I think it's really important to talk about how and who can support them. So online studying and work time. Is there a classmate that they would like to work with on their math homework? They may not be able to work together like they normally would inside the classroom, but they can log on to Teams, they can, call each other, and they can work through that homework together and still engage in their academics while also having a little bit of social. And I think that when there's a buddy system, there's more buy-in on getting it done. And then I also think lunch dates with your friends are also important. You have a papa. So, and the last thing that I am going to talk about, I think that it's really, I think it's important in the virtual world and where we are right now with how life is going, is to think about emotional tracking. No one knows your student as well as you do. And when you think about where your students are at, I think it's good to see trends as well as patterns, like trends and patterns of their moods. So if they have less control in life, there's typically a result of higher anxiety and stress for all of us. Your students are no different in that. So that they are losing a little bit of control. The pandemic has taken a lot of control from all of us. And so that increases the anxiety and stress that we feel. And that then makes emotional tracking even more impactful. So you don't have to use these, the zones isn't something that you have to use in your terminology, but when students start to feel overwhelmed or anxious or agitated, it's going to be easier for them to get panicked or to get angry and to feel like that things can't be done, or that life isn't fair, or that the teachers are asking too much for them, or it's not possible. What's being asked of them is not possible. And so I think that those are the times where we give grace to ourselves and to our students to make sure that they know that you can step back. You can use some strategies to engage in other activities, breathing, talking with a friend, just stepping away for a minute. And then coming back to it at a different time. And I always think about, so I obviously have children, and my own son is a much more engaged person in the morning. He is a morning person. And so that is when his green zone is shining bright. It's when he can regulate his emotions. It's when he's calm. And so that would probably be where we would do his most challenging work for him, is when during the periods of time where he feels the most energy. If you notice that your child is in a sad, tired, lethargic place, it might be a good opportunity for you to encourage them to reach out to a friend or to reach out to one of the school counselors at Boltz to talk about ways that they can cope or problem solve, to just not necessarily fix the zone or fix the feeling, but recognizing that when certain feelings are present, learning can be impeded, or when you're in a green zone, when you're in a good place, good learning happens. And so at school, in a pre-COVID world, students would be able, when they maybe weren't in a good place, to get up from the classroom and walk around in the hallways or to go to the wellness center. And so finding that dynamic in your own home and within your own rhythm can be a place where you not only give yourself grace, but you give your students grace. And, taking it one day at a time, making sure that we're good to each other. And at the end of the day, tomorrow they have another chance. Today is not the last chance. Tomorrow there's another chance to get it right. And then some resources is there's Parent View, and then there's how-to documents on the Parents Boltz website, and then there's the Safe to Tell. And then after our discussion, if you could do me a huge favor and do a survey of the workshop to let me know your feedback, that would help me in my own learning. And then for now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open it up to discussions.
Okay, can you see the chats?
I can.
Okay.
Okay, so where are the how-to resources at Boltz? So, hold on one second. Let me pull that up. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, do you see the Boltz website? Okay, so I'm at the parents website. So if you're up here and you click parents, when you come to the Boltz website, there's a parents link up at the very top. And if you scroll down, there are how-to documents in the yellow. It's got how to check your student's grade, how to use a Google Classroom, how to use OneNote. There's a parent's guide to parent view. So those are where those documents are located. And then I'll have to stop sharing my screen to see the other one. Are there any other, I think that's the only question. Are there any other questions that people have?
Could Deb, for a minute, could you talk about the presentation we gave the kids on how to kind of self-regulate a little bit?
Yes, I don't have that up to share my screen, but Kate, sorry to have you share your screen again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But maybe we could show the parents where to access the PowerPoint. Basically, we had our teachers teach all of the students a way to use the Wellness Center at home, or if they're sitting in class, and it's self-regulation tools. It is also strategies to help with anxiety, to help be organized, to help take a breath during the day. So it is a PowerPoint that kind of walks them through, and they can click on certain activities. Even if, like, an example, and I'm sorry I don't have it in front of me, is they can do click art on the computer just to, again, help their mindset. There it is. So we just created this because we didn't know how long we would be in the virtual world. Obviously, we are so glad we did this. But basically, it will walk you through several slides of some different strategies that teachers have taught the kids. And Kate can go through it kind of quickly, but it is on our website and it's in our counseling page. And if you needed to book an appointment with Christy, Kate, or myself, our bookings page is also at the very end of this presentation as well. Bitmojis were hard to learn for me, I gotta admit. I got it down now though. So that is our booking site right there, depending on who you would need to book an appointment with. We are more than happy to do that. And students use this all the time. They're much more comfortable now than they were back in the spring. So we have a lot of students that book appointments this way.
Any other questions?
Real good ideas. Always open. Just curious, how are things going? I know concerns about mental health for the children are high on everybody's mind. And have you seen some more calls for help or issues, or how's that going? And also love to get any updates on what the predictions are for when we can get back to school, if you are tuned into some of those inside tracks.
Kate, do you want us to jump in here? Or?
I cannot speak to the plans for the Cooter School District for the spring semester. I am not sure of how to answer that. I can speak to the concerns about mental health. I feel like being new to Boltz in this situation, I feel like all of the teachers are very attuned to trying to get a pulse on where their students are and trying to be proactive to reach out to them. I think that's one of the important things about turning on the screen is that when a teacher can't see the student, they can't assess if things are okay or if things are struggling. And so I think that in the remote world, it becomes a process of either a support system notifying somebody at Boltz that there's a concern, or the student has to notify someone that there's a concern. And as I was talking about, like the internal and external factors, I think that's hard for a student to know that they are struggling until they're really struggling. And so I think that that's where grown-ups and support systems can be really helpful in letting us know that they think that we should reach out to a student.
I'm going to jump in here for 1 second, Kate. On the issue of what's possibly going to happen in the spring, the honest truth is we usually find out 5 minutes before the parents do. And that's the honest truth. So we get an email usually from our principal about 5 minutes before the district email goes out. And that's as quickly as he's finding out. So I don't know if the decisions are happening that last minute or just they're holding on to information. We're not sure, but I think Brett Larson is trying to share it as quickly as he gets it. We're all asking the same question. Just even today, I said, what do you think is going to happen? and he didn't really have any answers for us. You know, we all have hopes of what that's going to look like, but we don't know. And I think too, for mental health needs, I think Deb Morrison and I have talked a few times about this. I think the kids are having a harder time reaching out to us to ask for help, because usually they can just find us in the building or we can see them and see that they look really down and call them in and kind of engage them that way. And they, I think because they're in their home environments, have a hard time having those conversations with us because they're in their homes. And I think that anytime you can encourage them to reach out to us, we will find ways to meet with them. And we can find ways to meet with them even in the building or walk around the building. Like they can, and we can, please don't do it on a blizzard, but even on a cold day, we can walk outside with them. We can meet. We're willing to be creative, to work with the kids. They're just starting to open up with us on Teams. It took a long time to get there. They're just finally starting to work with us on and just kind of doing those virtual meetings. And I do make them turn their cameras on because I do need to assess how they look. Like see their facial expressions. I need to see kind of how they're doing. So I don't know if that answers your questions, but please encourage them to reach out. Or if you want to just send us an email, we'll reach out to them as if it's our own. Hey, we're just checking on you. How's it going? It's just hard in this environment because we can't see them. So we can't tell how they're doing.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here. And I know that there was a question about advisory, and Christy can maybe speak to that a little bit later, but I want to reassure everyone that the theme is that kids are having a very difficult time and parents are probably having a more difficult time with this transition and how we are running the show in this virtual world. Motivation is low. I mean, it just is. It's a struggle, and it's a real struggle for parents to know how much time their student should be behind a screen, because then they want to get on their laptops and play games and Xbox and etc. So it is a very difficult balancing act, and I can speak to that myself, that it's very difficult having kids in school as well. And so I just feel like we're all doing the best we can, but please use Christy, Kate, and I to help if your student is like, I don't care anymore. I'm just kind of giving up on this semester. Well, we can encourage them to set appointments with their teachers just to have office hour time so that they can keep encouraging them. We can speak to them more on that mental health side of it, about how we are going to get through this. There is hope at the light at the tunnel. We just have to keep going. I mean, this is all about resilience. And a lot of our students haven't had to face that in an educational setting, I guess, in this physical world, virtual world. So we can just continue to help speak to them about that. I have students that I speak with regularly every single week at this point. I mean, that's how much they need just a little bit more TLC, and they need another adult who doesn't know them personally in their home to just keep encouraging them. My own son's even like, I don't want to talk to you about any of this anymore. I'm done. So you're not alone with that. Christy, can you speak to the advisory web leader groups?
Yeah, I'm so glad to see that we find web. That's awesome. So I run web, and and it's been the hardest year ever. I've done web for like 15 years, and this is the hardest year we've ever had, trying to figure out how to train the web leaders, keep them engaged, have them engage their sixth graders. You know, they're trying to be teachers now online with sixth graders, and it's not easy for sure. It was way easier when they could see them live, but here is our plan for web. Is that we meet with leaders tomorrow, and we're going to encourage them to reach out individually to each sixth grader at least once by a certain date. And then we're going to do a play date with them on the 16th before we head into winter break. So we're connecting at least one more time and playing with them. So they'll have like an individual contact with their web leader, and then they'll have an invitation to play on a Wednesday afternoon. There was another question there about like, how do we balance screen time? And I think that's where the advisory piece came in, where the teachers and Brett Larson really felt like, let's get them off their screens, and advisory is just one more chunk of time where they're on their screen. And I think if you feel differently about that, like you feel like advisory time is important and vital and the kids need it, then I think you should reach out to him and tell him that. I think he's really going off of the parents that are saying too much screen time, this is too hard, this is too much. And so, you know, we're trying to hear and listen and adjust as much as we can to what the needs of the families are. So if you feel like advisory is something we need to figure out, then, you know, definitely let him know.
Okay, so there was a question about keeping kids motivated and excited for the weeks leading up to winter break, knowing that they won't be back in the school walls. I think one thing that comes to mind with motivation is it's different for every student. What motivates one person is going to look different than what motivates another person. And so I believe during this time, if you know something that your student really enjoys, that you build that in. I always, when I meet with students, I talk about balancing work that they really enjoy versus work that they really don't enjoy. And so how do you create that fluctuation? So if math is your joy subject, we do math maybe closer to the end of the day when your energy level is waning, so that you don't feel like I'm not going to do that like you maybe would with English if that's not your joy subject. And then I also think if like we'll say if English isn't your joy subject, then after you complete English, maybe you get to go do 15 minutes or 20 minutes of something that's not academic related, that is something that is, you know, what I would consider free choice. And then the overall motivation is something that I think acknowledging that motivation is hard to come by right now, and asking what they need and what they want, and trying to figure that out for them. And if they're not able to communicate that, then I think that that's a really good time to reach out to their school counselor or to myself, so that we can talk to them about where they're finding joy right now.
We just ended a kindness challenge at Boltz. I don't know if you saw that or your students talked about that at all, but I think when they were really getting excited about that is because they're doing something for somebody else. And I think if you could help them figure out how to do that online, like maybe doing something for their teacher before break, like some sort of positive notes, or sending notes to fellow classmates online, but how could they think about other people during this time, I think is really valuable for them. And so maybe pushing them, they have a kindness journal that they could work in a little bit, but I think really getting them to think outside of themselves a little, like, how do we help our teachers get through this time? Or how do we motivate, how do we let them know that we appreciate them and get their minds thinking maybe in a tiny bit of a different path?
And then another question is, my student is normally very high achieving, but is currently failing multiple classes. Why didn't his teachers flag me?
Yeah, boy, that is a real tough one. Sorry, Kate, do you mind?
No,
you
take that one.
Yeah, so What we will most likely be doing again is we have weekly meetings, team meetings, where we discuss some student achievement, progress, etc. And that has been interrupted several times. And I can't speak to why the teachers haven't reached out to you individually. I do know that we're looking at academics right now. Like, I have definitely been speaking with some parents who are looking at Parent View kind of for the first time, actually. And since we've gone back, and there is a big concern. I think there's a little bit of a discrepancy sometimes of when some assignments are put in to the system so that you can see them. So there may be some of a delay. When in doubt, I would reach out to Christy, Kate, or I. If you are not finding that you're able to have communication from your teachers, and we can streamline that email for you, so we can find out where are the possible gaps. Is it missing assignments, or is it assessments? And I know that you can see that on Parent View, but sometimes it's hard to communicate exactly what you're looking at versus what we can see. So we are more than happy to help navigate that communication if you need that. Otherwise, I would reach out to teachers and just directly ask them, say, where are things falling apart at this point? Sorry, Christy, go ahead.
I've had multiple meetings with parents and kids about this exact topic. Yeah. And one of the solutions that we came up with multiple meetings is that the kids feel so buried in this because it's so foreign to them. We call it play school really well, and they know how to do it. And for some reason, they're not being able to do that in this environment. And they just feel so buried. And so one of the things we kind of talk about with the parent is, let's not focus on the grade right in this moment in time, and let's focus on changing the pattern that kind of shot us down into this rabbit hole. Let's change that pattern so that we are starting to move in a better way. Like, we're not missing any class. We're not going to miss another assignment in math class, or we're going to ask 5 questions today to make sure I understand this lesson. Or we just work on focusing on changing the pattern versus really focusing on the grade. I think that has helped kids dig themselves out of the hole where they're never going to be able to change this. This is awful. I feel horrible. I'm never going to be able to do this. When we stop focusing on the grade and we really focused on just changing the pattern that they got themselves stuck in. And then obviously I'm involved in that, so I can help with that and continue to chat that student and be like, did we do this today? Did we do that today? Did you remember to do this? So like Deb just said, reach out to us so we can help.
And then the last question is spacing out screen time, since so much of our current environment is on phones, laptops, TVs. Any insight on how to strike a balance? And I read that and I can relate. It's something that I myself wonder about. And I think that it goes back to what Christy was saying about why advisory was removed from the schedule and why they're working to have the synchronous time be in the morning. And then I know that if there's opportunities for your students to do some of the work off of the computer on paper, if there's opportunities for them to, play games or have hobbies off of the screen, and then looking at the screen differently, whether it's a screen of choice or a screen of requirement. And I know that there's a theme of being while on the screen with the classroom, finding themselves distracted by other things that are also on the screen, and recognizing that as human and talking to your student about how that happens and how do we recognize when that's happened so that we can get back on track, so that we can get off the screen sooner. Those are the things that come to my mind. I suspect Christy and Deb also have insight into that.
Yeah, I already shared kind of my, not insight, but perspective on my own challenges with my own children. So yes, all I can say is I hear you, and you are not alone, and we are all still trying to balance this out as best as we can. But in speaking with parents, they all think that they're the only one going through this because maybe they have only one other parent that they heard they're rocking it or something. But most of the parents that we speak with are really struggling, and they just want to know they're not alone in this, and it's taking it one day at a time. I see there's quite a few more chats too.
This is a follow-up to your pattern discussion, Christy. Have you found key pattern disruptors with this age that helps move them when they feel overwhelmed by remote? What comes with it?
I don't know if I found what they all are for each kid. It's different for every kid, but what I think is school is so different for them right now. That things that worked for them in the past just aren't working now. So they're giving up pretty quickly and then just like, I'm out, and the teacher can't see them. Teacher's buried with all these other kids. So it's easier for them to hide than they've ever been able to hide before. I think especially our kids that maybe kind of sat in that BC range for a long time, they're able to hide so much easier in this world. And so they just it just falls out of control so fast for them, I think, this virtual world. And I just think being able to accept this is where I am right now, and we're going to be okay with that, but now we're going to do things a little differently, and then resetting what those things are different, acknowledging what the hardships were, the parts they're struggling with, and then saying, okay, we're not going to worry about that grade right now, but what we are going to worry about is that you're going to change this, this, and this. And so I think that's really, and letting them know that we all know this is hard.
Yeah, and I would
I don't think that answers that, but
it's hard.
No, I also add in speakings with some families and some students that the hard thing is there sometimes has to be an adult in the house to really observe this type of behavior, right? And these types of patterns. So you know your child best if they're responsible to handle these things. But really small chunks of time, and then a break, and then a chunk of time, and then a break. That seems to be a little bit easier, especially for our active kids. Maybe it's a chunk of time and then they do some kind of a physical activity, whatever that might be. And that might just be like 3 minutes, like as if they were passing in a hallway. Maybe that's the time they get a snack, et cetera, et cetera. That seems to just be helping a little bit. It brings, a little bit of serotonin to the brain, wakes them up a little bit. So that might be helpful, just to do some chunks and breaks. I'm sure you've all tried this already. And then the second thing that I was thinking that seems to help somewhat is have incentives. And I know that not everybody wants to do that, but maybe consider it. Incentives as if they put in this much time, they deserve or they earn X, etc. So it might just have to be something like that, especially getting through these next 3 weeks. If your kiddo is really, really struggling and has very little motivation, you might have to kind of like hand feed some of that motivation a little bit just to get him kickstarted into a better pattern.
That made me think, I also think when you have those conversations about things that maybe aren't going well, to start off with things that are going well. So when you do the daily check-ins, finding time to connect on, asking what went well today, where do you think you're doing well today, and then maybe going into the things that didn't go so well. And then I know that it can be challenging. I mean, I also think that just finding time for that positive connection when they're not feeling like they've done well. So while we're frustrated that things aren't the way that they should be, that they haven't completed their assignments, or they're on YouTube for 7 hours a day instead of on their classes, instead of that being the focal point, focusing on what is good. And then, after they feel maybe some positive affirmation, some positive thought, then talking to them about maybe things that can be changed.
It's a question too about athletics. I don't have any answers about athletics right now. I feel like we don't know at the middle school level, especially. I feel like they just really shut down the middle school athletics. But I think, Colleen, if you want to reach out to Josh Ritchie, he would be the one that would have the most updated current information around where we are with possible spring athletics.
I can just say,
I was reading Christie's about,
So there's a parent.
oh, so sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, in one of the messages that Brett sent out, it talked about the athletics, that nothing is happening as of now. Maybe by February, only 3 spring sports, and it would be, what is it, track, and 2 other sports. I can't remember, tennis and something else, maybe the only 3 that would be possibly, but I don't think they said anything would be known until at least February in one of the emails from Brett.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. I'm sure I read that. I'm sure I did.
Lots of information going around.
More emails, more emails.
It's one that I read.
It's true. I just wanted to reassure Christy that we would definitely pass that along to teachers and administrators about Fridays. You bet.
And I have saved the chat so that we can do some follow-up.
Great.
So. Any other questions? I'm gonna do a self-plug again at the very end of the chat, just to encourage you to complete my survey for the workshop you attended today. I'm doing it again on Friday, so I'll take your feedback and implement changes and things like that as suggested.
We'll definitely talk to Brett about, there was a parent question in there around having a little Zoom call with him to give him some feedback too, and I think he'd be open to that. So we'll talk to him about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for showing up for Kate's presentation. And we love that we are actually getting to work with you and speak with you. We miss our students so much.
And our parents.
So, I know, and the parents. We just hope to have a little bit of normalcy at some point soon. So thanks for hanging in there. We know this has been a rough road for all of you.
Yeah, thanks. Good ideas.
Thank
I'm
you.
taking notes.
Hi, everybody.
Have a good night.
Yep. See ya.
Bye.